A few weeks ago, during my mission to level a character through every expansion, I tried my hand at the Burning Crusade. Fast forward in time to this week when I went back in time to Draenor to once again see what it has to offer. Only this future version of Draenor is set in the past and has learned its lessons from the old version to use in the new, which in itself is a recreation of Outland as if the future version of it never came to pass. But does that make it better? Look, if you're just as confused listening to that as I was writing and saying it, don't worry, because I leveled a character through Warlords of Draenor and have noted down everything that is needed to understand why you should consider it for your next World of Warcraft character. In this video, I will tell you all about its questing, dungeons, and how well it prepares your character for current content. By the end of it, you'll be qualified to be the next Doctor Who, as all this wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey stuff won't have any effect on you any longer. Let's get right into the... You know, for being the first expansion that features zones we've already seen in World of Warcraft... Wait, no, I can't say that Cataclysm exists. Shoot. Hold on, let me try that again. You know, for being an entire expansion based around being the past version of a place we've already been, Draenor questing manages to have really good variety. It truly felt familiar while throwing things at me that I've never seen in Outland. Out of all the classic expansions, I played Burning Crusade the most. Yet despite that, I had never actually used Warlords of Draenor to level a retail character. Sure, I played through its intro because it was one of the most ludicrous XP gains you could have in all of retail questing, but I never had the curiosity to sit down and take a character entirely through Warlords of Draenor. As usual with this series, I used no heirlooms or guides. I went in and paved a path through Draenor with my music blasting and my fingers a-tapping. And I gotta say, there were multiple times where I genuinely got excited by the content I was doing. I'm really glad that I did the Burning Crusade video first, because as I was going through this alternate Outland, I couldn't help but notice just how much time Blizzard spent making it feel right. It's a bit uncanny how much of a mirror Warlords of Draenor leveling feels like in multiple senses of the word. If you are a classic veteran who wants an expansion to level through that is the best mix of what you know and love, and the more modern systems of retail, Warlords of Draenor is perfect for that. Here's what you can expect. WoD has an interesting strategy when it comes to how its questing works. It has quests that are clearly its main campaign story, but unlike say Mist of Pandaria, they aren't marked as such, nor do they follow the same cadence. In addition to that, it offers side objectives and lots of roaming elites. It all combines to make a map look like this. Yeah, that's Gorgrond. Some of you may remember that I talked about chaos questing in my Burning Crusade video. Well, it's back, and dare I say, it's actually done better? I'm sure there are strategies and all to fully take advantage of Warlords of Draenor's abundance of questing XP, but I took the same approach as I do in all these videos. I do everything I can in a zone, questing wise, and then move on to the next. This may look like a lot, but in actuality, it's pretty simple. It's chaos, but simplified. Warlords of Draenor has quest hubs that sends you to other questing areas. Take Rexxar's hub for example. It not only has its own quests, but sends you to talk to other NPCs in the surrounding area that have more localized tasks. You help those guys and they send you back to Rexxar. Eventually, all this quote-unquote mess gets systematically cleaned up. Draenor does a wonderful job using its entire zone. Which kinda sounds odd when half the zone clearly looks unused, but perhaps it's easier for me to just make a list. Here's everything you can expect to encounter while leveling in Draenor. This definitely has the most variety of any expansion I've tested so far. You have main story quests, side quests, bonus quests, random mini-map marked elites that give decent XP and cool rewards, dungeon quests which I didn't do on this character, and finally, scenarios. This right here, my friends, is why it looked like half of Gorgrond was unused. Throughout your journey in WoD, you will come across instanced areas that were honestly one of my favorite parts of all of this. Let's take the most famous one that a lot of people know and use it as a prime example. The intro of Warlords of Draenor. Right out the gates, you are thrown into one of these scenarios. You will always be able to tell when you are in one because you can't fly anywhere. But they do such a good job at spicing up the leveling. Honestly, all the variety does that. Scenarios let you just go berserk, bonus objectives let you turn off your brain, main story quests give you a very structured path, and side quests let you explore the world. Even the elites around the map just call to you whenever one shows up. If you want to speed up your leveling, you can just ignore them. But I gotta say, I got 2 mounts out of them, so they give pretty decent stuff. What I especially love about the approach that Draenor takes is that if you aren't loving a zone, you don't have to go too deep into it. Yes, it does railroad you a bit, which I will say is a downside. To unlock all the quests in a zone, you do have to follow the main story somewhat. But as I was saying, you don't have to fully complete a zone to move on. Everything is centered around your garrison being a command hub. Once you get a bearing on what's going on in a zone, there will often be a quest that lets you go back to your garrison and they send you elsewhere. Speaking of the garrison bonuses, they really do make you feel like a leader. Every zone has 2 bonuses you can choose from when you get a little bit into the story in that zone. Usually it's in the form of a button you can press that aids you in combat. For example, in Shadowmoon Valley, I could call a squad of guards to my side. In Talador, I was able to order a bombardment. And hey, here's a cool one that I really wish I knew about before. The Spires of Iraq one flat out gives you an option to earn 20% more XP while in that zone. When I got there, I was basically done with leveling, so that's kind of a bummer. But hey, good thing you're watching this video because now you know. And if you are enjoying this video, I would enjoy if you hit that like button. Thank you very much. All these zones have cool abilities they give you. How many zones should I expect to visit though? Well, it depends. While I was going the completionist method, I used 3 of them to their entirety and dabbled in a 4th for the last 5 or so levels. But so far, Warlords does have the most options for how you want to go questing in it. There are some strategies that have you focus solely on the bonus objectives. They're quick, they're easy, and they give a lot of XP for a single quest. The downside of that is none of the bonus objectives give gear. So unless you have heirlooms, I wouldn't really recommend doing only bonus objectives. Even with doing my completionist method, I got my character to level 70 in just under 9 hours. Granted, I spent like 30 minutes of that going after elites that didn't give too much XP. Yeah, 30 minutes, there's a lot of elites. I even started ignoring them because they were taking up so much of my time. I was told Warlords of Draenor questing was fast, and it certainly didn't disappoint, so that part wasn't surprising. But its style and how well it executed it? Phenomenal. I do my best not to directly compare things to previous videos. In some areas, I actually can't avoid doing that, but in this case, I'm going to intentionally do it, because I feel like it has to be addressed. A lot of the complaints I had about TBC leveling are honestly fixed here. This feels like an updated Outland, it really does, which really excites me. I already want to quest through it again. On that note, I think it's time to give it a rating. This is an 8 out of 10 in my mind. I do have an odd issue with its kind of railroady restrictions. For example, I wanted to go to the Spires of Iraq before Gorgron, but that really wasn't an option since it only had side quests there at the time. I also would have been doing it without the bonus, as you don't get any abilities until you build the garrison outpost in the region, which the main story stuff leads you to do. But that being said, I'm glad I didn't do Iraq because I loved Gorgrond. I even liked Talador despite going into it with a grudge because it's been a thorn in my side every single earthen leveling run. Overall, Warlords of Draenor questing experience is flat out fun. I honestly wished I could see more of its zones before hitting level 70. There's just so much to do in them. But remember when I said that there were multiple meanings to WoD being a mirror of TBC? Well, let's go deeper into that. I'm just gonna flat out say it, I do not like these dungeons. They are pretty cool dungeons, don't get me wrong. Their themes are 10 out of 10, but actually doing the dungeons? Back when I was relatively new to the game, I had to decide what I wanted to do to level a character. I got to Draenor and did the intro and wanted to try out healing some more. I dabbled a bit in Legion, but never really played that much, so this character I wanted to get stuck in. I queue for a dungeon and get right into Shadowmoon Burial Grounds as one of my first dungeons as a healer. On a healer I never played before, no less. It is to this day one of the worst dungeon experiences I've ever had. I was going the wrong way, the group was dying, the first boss was so confusing to me. I mean, nowadays I understand the dungeon, but it is the furthest from being new player friendly that dungeons can really get. Maybe Shadowland dungeons take the cake for that now, but compared to the Legion ones I was used to, it was very discombobulating. I've gone back and leveled through WoD dungeons a couple times, but in a game where you have 10 other sets of dungeons you can choose from in terms of leveling, I really can't recommend these. However, I don't want to be entirely negative. So like I said, they are cool concepts. A moving train, a revisiting of Auchindoun as it's getting taken over by the Legion. These concepts are well executed as well, but that's as much as I can say in favor of them. In the Burning Crusade video, I said that the questing was alright, alright, but the dungeons were amazing. Here, the questing is amazing, and the dungeons are alright at best. Maybe one day Blizzard will turn old raids into leveling raids, where you can go in and absolutely stomp everything for XP. Even running the raids for transmog makes me wish they did the dungeons as well as they did the raids. Overall, I'm gonna give the dungeons a 5 out of 10. Thankfully, with the change to time walking dungeons, you can easily queue those while questing in Draenor. Eventually, I plan to test all the time walking sets, so perhaps I'll change my mind, but for now, there's just better options. I have some good news and I have some not so good news. We'll start with the actually good stuff. The gold you get from Warlords of Draenor is great. 7,500 is pretty decent for leveling gold gains. Each of the bonus objectives gives a good amount of it as a reward, but that is part of the problem if gold isn't what you're looking for, because gold and XP is all they give. The gearing side of this section, which matters a bit more than gold in my opinion, did break the 300 item level mark, but only just. Warlords of Draenor leveling is fast. Part of the price for its speed is in the gearing department. I did end up getting item level 306. It's not the worst that's been on this series, but it is decently close to being the worst. Luckily, it only comes down to a few pieces lagging behind. I leveled so fast, I just didn't get many pieces towards the end of the road. My rings were great, my weapon is really good, but all it takes is a bad trinket and wrist to drag the average down. However, 9 out of the 15 slots for my gear were filled with 300 item level or above. Just to test it, I put on an heirloom trinket, cloak, and pants. Doing so put me at item level 330. Just 20 away from the mark of 350 that's always my goal for these videos. But the actual 306 is pretty far off that goal. Barely getting into acceptable ranges in my book, honestly. Plus, with the complete lack of any extra free bags, this section is gonna get a rating of 6 out of 10. If you aren't worried about gear, the gold and leveling speed is nice. Plus, I had a blast with the journey, and I'm starting to realize with so many choices, it really comes down to what the individual is looking for. But that's talk for... The more I do this series, the harder and harder it gets not to talk about the other expansions I tested. I am doing my utmost to keep each one in a vacuum. I set a standard and I stick to rating them based off that. The overall rating has always been the least important part in my opinion. Perhaps you guys think otherwise, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. So here's my rating based off of these very standards. With the time walking dungeon changes and how easy it is to gear alts, questing has to be the highlight of this series. I almost didn't include dungeon ratings at all, but I wanted a more complete package. I'm just mentioning that before I give Warlords of Draenor a 7 out of 10. It got a low dungeon score and an okay gearing score, but I really loved its questing. It's like a movie that has okay dialogue and okay plot, but the action is really good, and most often you'll remember it for that action. I thought about giving it a lower score and just recommending you do Mists of Pandaria leveling. It stacks up pretty well against Warlords of Draenor, but the time for direct comparisons will come in the final video. So for now, Warlords of Draenor is a blast if you focus on the questing. It also has great speed for that questing. I could go on and on glazing that aspect of it, but I think you get the point by now. If you're curious about how well Pandaria did compared to Warlords of Draenor, check this video out on the right. Next week is finally going to be Cataclysm, because I found a pretty decent way that I wanted to do it. And thanks to me skipping a video last week, I was able to put in a little extra time to do 2 characters, 1 Horde and 1 Alliance. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe. My name has been Kale, and have a wonderful journey.